I'm delighted to share with you tonight the last chapter, a bit of a spoiler to Jeremiah's Hunger. And as Barbara mentioned, in 1994 I discovered my grandmother's home, my life was changed forever. What happened was I knew when I realized that he had survived the famine, that I had too. That I had the responsibility now to tell that story. So it took me a few years to research it, but in 2011, this book was launched at Pluta Cancer Center. Barbara will tell you more about that. So one of the things that happened was that when Jeremiah married, it was on a Tuesday in Lent, and it was the night before Lent because he couldn't be married in Lent, so it was February 1st. Marriages were not allowed in Lent. And one of the things that I now know is that his marriage has made all the difference in my life. Imagining Jeremiah, Tuesday, May 2nd, 1888. Jeremiah found the dawn eerie and oddly consoling. A white gold sky, as if a pre-Raphaelite painting. Michael and Julia were readying the horse and trap for a trip to Queenstown. Jer and Lizzie were helping Maggie with her last-minute remembrances. A piece of turf, some knitting needles, a booklet they had made for her. The ship would sail the next morning at 7. She and Julia and Michael would stop in a small inn by the quay, arranged for by Father Pope, whose kindness and connections had been a great gift to the entire congregation. Jeremiah stayed in the cabin, watching the hustle and bustle from Maggie's window. No one ate much for breakfast, even though Margaret had made a good batch of porridge and even griddle cakes. He'd see to it that it was saved for later. Father Pope had stopped earlier with an envelope for Maggie that he had asked her to save until she was aboard the ship. She tucked it into her cloth valise and said, "You'll not be forgotten by this young Irish lass, Father Pope. I've been reading my rosary ready for the ship, and you'll be the first one I'll be saying one for." Ah, she's a grand one, Jeremiah thought, appreciating his little. Tim's made an appearance that morning and even helped hitch the horse to the trap, checking the wheels and straps for any weak links on the frayed buckles. He looked halfway decent as he poked about the yard. It was hard to imagine there was so much wrong with him. Hard to imagine. Jeremiah had seen him sitting last night at the party with Nora, hopeful that Tim realized what he had to lose and what he stood to gain. Ah, the drink. Jeremiah had imagined a lot these past days. He'd remembered his own childhood, the bright flashes of trips with the Da, the days of O'Connell, and then the darkness that came with the hunger. It seemed so long ago, yet it was never far from mind. He watched Margaret as she moved in and out, around and about, helping to ready things. He remembered her as Michael's little sister, his good friend Michael. And then he remembered her as a young girl with whom he felt hopelessly in love. He remembered his foray into rebellion with Michael as they rode for Ballingarry, their youth making them fierce warriors for the cause. And he remembered his wedding day, the birth and the death of their first child, and the struggles that came with the land, the droughts, and the rainy seasons. He felt a tug at his heart as he remembered Michael, whose presence had been like a perpetual turf fire, lending light and warmth when it was most needed. As his children had grown, so had Ireland. Since the days of Angor Timor, there had emerged a new sense of dignity and presence. It had been slow, but it had been steady. Gladstone, Isaac Butt, even Cardinal Cullen, and especially priests like Father Lane, created a landscape of dignity for the people of Ireland. Daniel O'Connell, William Smith O'Brien, Thomas Mayer, and John Devoy, with whom Michael had become totally enamored. They were all heroes for Ireland. Eugene Cronin, Hattie Murphy, Dennis Carroll, his neighbors, all of them, living and making life better for one another. These were the Irish heroes. Even the landlord, Mr. Bennett, who was caught at a time in history when right and wrong were blurred by the need for money, punts, and coins, replacing dignity and common sense. Jeremiah considered himself blessed to live in these times, unable to imagine any other time or any other place he'd rather be from. His final purchase of the land has been his private victory. He made no fanfare of his trip to put in the paperwork. Ashamed, maybe, to be saddling Michael and whoever else would undertake this 46 acres upon his death, but proud to be a landowner, an Irish farmer, and proud to be a Buckley. He had imagined this life since he had first heard the Dá tell of the English and the Protestant ascendancy, first heard the stories of injustice that accompanied the penal laws. He savored the sweetness of this victory, achieved by the pen and not the pipe. It remained to be seen what Parnell could provide for Ireland. The talk wasn't good, but then talk was just that, talk. Jeremiah had learned from his father to sift and to sort it. He learned to listen more and roar less. He watched as Father Pope rode off, Margaret and the children waving after him. Then he felt his heart pound in his chest as he saw his son Michael, grown now to over 6 feet tall, lift Maggie, his 15-year-old, into the trap. Jeremiah had said his goodbye and had no intention of going out there into the yard, but still the pain was real. As the twins climbed up to hug Maggie, he watched his own wife Margaret step back and wrap her arms around herself, as if holding herself together, or maybe imagining she was holding this precious daughter for one more hug. As the trio moved forward, he watched Tim's wave from atop the fence. So there was something left in Tim's after all, Jeremiah thought. He felt a calm come to him with this little ray of hope. Then he saw Maggie, almost pushing her backwards in the trap, waving with all her might, as if she could summon the breeze to carry her back for one more hug, for one more goodbye. Michael and Julia sat on either side of her, the trunk securely fastened behind. Jeremiah had heard some of the carrying on going on in the night of the wee hours, until the party had finally disbanded. He hadn't slept well, nor had Margaret. The music rang in his head long after the fiddling stopped. He saw Maggie dancing her last dance for him, and he bravely fought from bawling in front of them all. He never imagined he'd have to say goodbye to 2 of his daughters. As a boy, he never knew of a place called America, and he never knew it could draw his children away from him. He remembered his own sister Eliza and baby Julia, losses that were part of the rhythm of life. He didn't understand this America loss. His brother-in-law Michael's departure in '67 had been the first of them. Since then, America had claimed handfuls from nearly every family he'd known. He'd heard of Queenstown, named for the Queen, when she visited in '47. It was Cove to him as a child, and Michael had stubbornly refused to call it anything but Cove. He'd been naive when Michael left, certain he would see him again, certain they would once more share a pint and solve the problems of Ireland. Then, when Mary left, he believed again that she would be back, believed that transportation was better now, faster. He thought perhaps Father John Joseph Reardon from Our Lady of the Mission of Our Lady of the Rosary would bring him back on one of his trips. But now, Father John was gone, and Maggie was gone too, gone to America. He memorized her in his heart. Then he reached into his pocket and retrieved the telegram that he had intercepted just 2 days ago. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Buckley, It is with deep sorrow I write to inform you of the death on the evening of April 28th of Reverend Michael Reardon. His death was not unexpected, though the doctor had thought he would live through the next season. Last rites were administered by his friend, Father Patrick Sweeney, and he was attended by the doctor up to the last. At his request, his body will be returned to Ireland for burial after a funeral service is held here in Condon Station on Monday, May 10th. We share a great loss. Signed, yours in Christ, Reverend Mary Xavier Mayen, Reverend Mother, nee Skibbereen, County Cork, Sisters of Charity at Elizabeth Mother House, Convent Station, New Jersey. Jeremiah carefully folded the paper and slipped it back into his pocket. There had been enough grief for this day. They would learn soon enough of Michael's death, soon enough. For now, they would continue to work the land and tend the hearth, for that is what they did. Thank you.